in the Q&A for the Grandpa Chappelle Principle, you always have some wisdoms from either you being a grandfather or your father or your grandfather. You've got a lot of amazing life lessons to teach people. Don, your thoughts, questions you have?
Well, no, I love that principle that you just talked about there because it's true that I think it goes across all lines, all ages, that we always think that we know more than we do, but we don't know what we don't know. And if you don't know what you don't know, you can't start learning.
Interesting. Anyone else have any other thoughts?
Well, another thing, if you go back to maybe a biblical principle, and what you're talking about there is, it says, in all thy education, get wisdom. And I think that's the key difference for most people that just kind of meander through life, is that they have a lot of raw data, they have a lot of academic knowledge, but they don't know how to apply it.
I remember my grandmother who passed away when she was 99 years old, probably about 5 years ago now. And I remember a couple things significantly about her. I remember once when we were watching something on TV that maybe we shouldn't have, but that was back in the day when, like everything was PG. But she didn't really like what we were watching, and she said, would your parents allow you to watch this? And I don't know, maybe we're being honest, maybe not. We said, yes, Grandma, yeah, they absolutely would. And she got up in front of the TV and spread her dress, kind of pulled out the side of her dress, and she covered, the TV because she didn't think it was appropriate or something. I love that about Grandma Boersma. It was her husband that shared the other thing. He passed away when he was in his mid-50s. And so I remember also her sharing, probably when I was 10, 11, 12, 15, I don't know what I was, but she said something about don't think more of yourself, another Bible passage. She said, don't think more of yourself than you should. And I thought, that's interesting. When we look at the internalization model, I love what Don said about gaining wisdom from everything and everyone. A lot of stuff there. Anyone else have any other questions or thoughts? Don, not the most active group today.
I do.
Yes.
I have a question. Yeah, I wanted to know, how do you help pull wisdom and information out from your own grandparents, and they have a lot, but they don't openly share it?
Yeah.
I think, maybe I wasn't hearing, because, the word I was thinking about as you were talking there, as far as learning from other people, is first of all listening. I don't think that we actively listen anywhere close to the way that we should, because we're so involved in coming up with the next sentence coming out of our mouth and about us, rather than hearing what the other person is saying and then taking that in and assimilating it to whatever our current basic knowledge is.
And Emily, I think that your grandparents probably were a lot like mine or my parents. I don't think they were like Don's and Don's grandfather or grandparents.
So, when I was in college, I interviewed my grandfather, who fought in World War II, volunteered after Pearl Harbor. He was a high school principal, and he got a Purple Heart, and he never talked about the war. And as I interviewed him for a project, it was about an hour-long interview using tape recorders back in the day. We still have that record, and it means a lot. You might interview them about what you're interested in and learn from it. It's an awesome experience.
There's magic to what Ed shared that very few people, like Don was saying, people don't listen well. And so I actually tried what Ed did with my grandmother, and it didn't work. And but I didn't have what I have now. I'm like, oh, that's the mistake I made. Oh, I can't believe I made that mistake. So frustrating. So I was probably in my 40s, and I asked if it was okay to interview my grandmother. So she would have been in her late 80s probably, and videotape it. And like none of my uncles or aunts let me do it. But I made a mistake. I didn't understand, what Ed just shared.
One other thought as you guys were talking came to my mind is I think most people, they take the fact that their grandma didn't do too well on the recording, and so they take that as the way it is for all, and so they give up the whole notion of that concept I guess the concept, and they never do it again. So
does anyone know why it worked with Ed and it didn't work with me? Was anybody listening at a quantum level?
Well, could it have been in the approach?
Well, yeah, but he approached things in a way that I could not approach them.
Such as?
If we were listening at a deep level, what did Ed say? He said two things that were key, that if I'd have thought of those back then, I would have been successful. It's like, oh, I can't believe I messed up on that. And I'll never get it back. Ever. So Ed said he did it for a class assignment. And he did it as a tape recorder, not a video. So if I would have taken one of my kids and I would have said, hey, here's because we homeschool them, here's a class assignment. Not do a videotape because that's a little bit intimidating to do video, but audio is a lot less intimidating. So if I'd have had one of my kids do it as a class project, an assignment for class, so that generation really respected, education, and they want to follow authority, and you follow assignments. Like, the assignment I had in class, Grandpa, was to go ahead and do an interview of you, and I'm just going to record it, on the audio. But I came in as an adult, and when they said, yeah, no, Grandma's kind of, failing and, a little bit in her health and sometimes she might not have clarity. It's like she's in her late 80s, she's in her early 90s. It'll be just fine. Like, she was a sharp lady. I mean, just unbelievable. But because it was video, it was a little too intimidating either for her or her kids. If it had just been, an audio, and if my kids had had it as an assignment to interview her and then brought the cassette or an iPhone or something, but not do the video recording, just do the audio, it could have pulled it off. That's awesome, Ed. I wonder, you could put that on, Grandpa's Magic Couch, that interview, if you wanted to.
Yeah, my brother has it. Put it on a CD, and now we can electronic a whole bunch of old stuff we've been playing it on, like slides and stuff. But anyway, thank you. It was one of the great experiences of my life.
How old were you?
19, 18,
Wow.
17.
Wow. Yeah, my grandfather...
So to come to your defense a little bit, Mark, is that back then they probably didn't have video.
Well, right.
Video was like... video recorders then were a big deal. I mean, that was beyond me. I didn't have the opportunity for that.
Right, and so, again, it's just thinking differently. It's like, wow. Like now when Ed said his story, I'm like, oh, I see it now. I know why I failed. But in a way, it hurt me very deeply, and I'm like, man, and I didn't know how to address it. Like I didn't know how to come back at it again because I didn't want to be the pushy grandkids or the selfish, grandson who just wanted, I wanted it for my kids. I wanted it for my grandkids. I wanted it for my great-grandkids. I wanted it for all the kids, in the world because she had so much, wisdom. So, Emily, did you get the answer on that?
I think so, yeah.
So have your kids have an assignment, a class assignment, and say, Grandpa and Grandma, can I interview you? And then they can do the alternate close, and they say, Grandpa and Grandma, would you prefer me to do a video recording of it or an audio? Like, give them an option. Which would you prefer, the video or the audio? And so you have
one of the other thoughts that I had, if I might interject there, Mark, is in the approach concept that I was talking about, was that I think if we understand what the person's weakness is or challenge is or reasons they don't do things, we can then use that actually. If we bring it up and overcome an objection before it becomes an objection by bringing it up and saying, for example, with Ed's grandfather, he had mentioned that he didn't like to talk about it for whatever reason. But you could use that same thing to pull it out of him by saying, look, Grandpa, I know that the war was a terrible, awful thing and that things in your head, but I really need your help in helping the next generation figure out what it was about and how they can avoid it. Or, I'm just
this is why I love Don and I getting on, because, man, I'm telling you, this is quantum thinking right here. And so what I might do in that situation, I'm not saying it's right, because sometimes it's better to overcome an objection before the objection's there. Sometimes that's better, because once the objection is verbalized, once the objection is verbalized, then
it deflates it.
It can go ahead and be hard to overcome. So sometimes it is.
Sometimes.
Yes, you're right too.
I was going to say sometimes old folks they'll do things for you personally that they don't want others to see.
Right.
So sometimes if it's just for you, they'll spill the beans where if you make it bigger, they won't get as deep.
Right.
Not as good.
That's also right. This is where it's, again, quantum thinking.
What I'm hearing here is exactly because if we are trying to monetize this, like that's the type of call that we're on, is a business call. How do we monetize this in our lives? Well, the way that we do it is that we overcome an objection before it becomes an objection. And you bring that out, and so it deflates it, and you're able to, move on to the next thing.
And I don't know who said this, a really wise grandfather said, sometimes people aren't that good at listeners, and they're thinking about what they're going to say before they actually say it, so they're not really listening. I think what Ed was trying to say...
I just said that a little bit ago.
Oh, did you? Okay, I didn't remember. I didn't remember who it was. I remembered somebody said it. Yeah,
I did.
And so what I think, Ed, when I was listening to Ed, I think what Ed was saying is that sometimes when you try, if you're really smart, too smart for your own good, sometimes you try to overcome an objection before it was an objection. Sometimes that's really smart to do that, but other times it implants the, like I didn't even think about that, especially with young kids because they're so innocent. So I'm just innocent, Grandpa. I'm just asking this question.
That comes down to fear. People will not bring something up because they're afraid of the negative, because that's what their past experience has been. And fear is always the crippler. But one of the things that I messed up and I didn't articulate in where I was going with this, that we really need to understand the different generations and how they thought. And so that when we're in a sales situation, we are not going to interact the same way with a 90-year-old as we would with a 60-year-old, as we would with a 40-year-old. And it's not to do necessarily, a part of it is to do with their driver amiable, analytic thing. But another part of it is, what is the social environment of that generation? And if we understand, so that's another part of our study that we need to be looking at, is what was going on and how do they think.
So I have a thought that might come around, is if you note something that they had struggles with, it's like people now have struggles with it, so you could say to them, I heard you had this struggle, and I'm starting to feel that myself. Did you overcome it? And so they may not have overcome it exactly, but they will have some ideas on how they've worked through it. And so you could actually get them to open up about how they're doing better.
Them, what I'm hearing from what you're saying there, and one of the points I was trying to make is when you ask help from somebody, people really do want to help you. So a great way to start that is actually ask. And people usually rise to the occasion at some point, maybe not right away, but that's another part of that, not being afraid to continue the conversation, because you have to be looking at always at the outcome. What is it that we're trying to get to? And so this little conversation that's happening here is only a pathway to the end result.
So this doesn't apply to any adults, and for sure not on this call, because it's a quantum thinking call with EC2. But it just reminds me, like, my grandkids are so anxious to talk. Like, they just, listen. And it's like, not, and so it is. It's complicated. There's a lot of nuances. So one of the things, that I have found is that it's good to anticipate what people's objections and fears may be. And it's good to be prepared for a response. But often, especially the amiable and the analytic personality, tend to have a lot of fears of a lot of things. And so it's good to be able to share something just like nonchalant, like it's not a big deal. Often we try to overcompensate for things, and we create objections that really wouldn't have been there if we'd have just talking about it. But definitely be ready for an objection, when it comes up. And that's where in the
One of the other things that I learned early on in my sales career was that people have the tendency, you go out and you talk to somebody and you get shot down. Well, the next person you talk to in your sales environment, you're going to bring that, you have the tendency to bring that negative to that conversation. And what I learned early on is that you have to take every situation individually and not bring any of the morass from the other stuff. But at the same time, you're always gaining in wisdom, because experience is about the only way that you can truly gain wisdom as to, when this situation happens, here's what I need to do. Here's the path. But you have to be willing to have some failure, to have things don't work out, and be okay with that and not cripple you. And, don't take it personal. It's all learning.
One of the 12 principles to life masteries is failure is always a choice. And what is failure? Failure is fail to try, so that's failure, or failure to learn. And that would be another great conversation I've had with a number of people this week where I'm like, it seems to me that a lot of people struggle with learning the right things from an experience. So again, beyond the scope of this conversation, but that's why you want to be part of the EC2 community. You know, you invest 7 minutes here or there listening to it. You know, you share that with other people. If they want to get more in depth into it, you know, then you invite them into the community, and there's all these unbelievable, deep, profound, life-changing insights, you know, that are shared. And again, if you have any questions, connect with the individual. Talk to your art mentor about this. Talk to your art buddies. We think we're going to learn the most from our art mentor, but we actually learn the most from our art buddies. You know, we think we learn the most from our parents, but for me, I've learned more from my children, and now I'm even learning more from my grandchildren than I did my own children. It's like, wow, this is really cool. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. God bless, and have an amazing day. Bye-bye.